Hey everyone, Mr. Wineland here. Let me just adjust this box so you can see me. So we've got the final section here. We're going to talk briefly about the business of America following the Warren G. Harding presidency, which only lasts about 2 years. And then Calvin Coolidge comes in and kind of changes some things. We'll dive a little bit more into Calvin Coolidge's presidency into the next chapter as well as in the 1920s. But this is kind of like a precursor, kind of telling people what to expect and what we're going to talk about. So hopefully we'll have fun with this. But real quick, number 13 is here in the yellow. Oh, sorry, number 13, is right here. And also your definition is in the yellow as well. But 13 is actually Calvin Coolidge, I believe. But anyway, so Calvin Coolidge comes in as the 30th president of the United States, which is funny, by the way. He was a pet lover. Guy loved pets, all types of pets. People actually gave him exotic pets, which he didn't keep at the White House. He eventually took them to the zoo and gave him, but he did keep a raccoon. So I did show that in class once. If you don't believe me, you could look CBS Sunday Morning and then look for Coolidge Pets or something like that. It's something like Calvin Coolidge Pets. So, but CBS Sunday Morning, Calvin Coolidge Pets, and they talk about his pet raccoon. So, yeah, it's pretty funny. But he's a very pro-business guy. He came in with a strong belief, saying the chief of business of America, American people is business, and the man who builds a factory builds a temple. The man who works there worships there. So both Coolidge and his Republican successor, Herbert Hoover, kind of favored, smaller government, as well as not having to pay a lot of taxes and keeping profits up and helping businesses as much as they can expand. So they didn't want to, their goal was to not interfere. And they kind of wanted to see if enterprise can flourish and grow in the 1920s. So that was kind of how they kind of did things. One of the biggest things that helped was the automobile. The automobile definitely changed the landscape of America. Before that, I mean, yes, they had roads, but most of that was for horseback and that was for wagons and carrying things. But eventually we start to see the automobile is invented. That changes things because as more and more people hear about this invention, they want to buy one, but they have to make it more affordable, which they do eventually. First it starts out with like one or a few models. It isn't until the automobile becomes a big part of our life that you start to see an expansion of models and brands and things like that. But it becomes more and more affordable. People are starting to buy one. And so this means that better roads had to be built. So be constructed to handle all sorts of weather. And so we also see one of the biggest things that happens is Route 66, which is a connecting highway to connect from Chicago to California, which is your California's answer number 16. Problem is, a lot of people didn't just use that to travel. They actually settled along Route 66. And that's part of the reason, watch the movie Cars. I mean, the town flourishes because more and more people are living there or stopping by in their town because they're along Route 66. Pops, for example, is successful. Kind of similar as well. Had grown to be success on Route 66 for many years. But so this plays out to be a big role in the growth of America. And so in addition to the changing landscape, we start to see more new houses are starting to change as well. It's not just like, we can change, we have to change the roads. It's also we have to change how we look at living because houses didn't really have a garage for a long time. They didn't have a carport. They didn't have a driveway. Basically it was, they kind of built them in a way where, you may have had like a little entry road, but for your wagon or your horse or whatever. But it just was different back then. So now they're starting to build garages, carports. They're starting to build driveways. They're thinking about the automobile, and ultimately that's going to change also the landscape of other businesses as well, and as we move further into the future. But also gas stations had to be built for gasoline to help with that. Repair shops had to be built, public garages, motels, tourist camps, shopping centers. And then when we finally get to fast food in the a little bit later on in the future, that changes the landscape of automobiles. Excuse me. We do see other construction like the Holland Tunnel from 1927 connecting New York City to New Jersey. We see a Woodbridge Cloverleaf finally intersection put in 1929. So kind of different off ramps constructed to help with traffic flow. We also see the automobile liberated travel as well, and shopping, entertainment, gave families an opportunity to vacation in new, faraway places. Your definition for urban sprawl is here in the yellow. So here, urban sprawl is here in the yellow. So you can go ahead and write that. If you need to pause, you're welcome to do so. Here's the thing about the urban sprawl is that with the automobile, it didn't mean that people okay. So if I had a job, it's kind of like today. Like I have a job here in Manford, okay, but I don't live in Manford. I live in a different town outside of Manford. So in order for, the thing is, in the past, it used to be there was a law that teachers had to live in the town they taught. Now, that law is no longer on the books. It basically is now like I live outside of this town. So I travel in. The car has allowed me to live elsewhere, but still work here. So, and that's kind of what we've seen at the beginning of the urban sprawl has opened up for everybody. This ability to, hey, I can go work in this city, but I don't have to live in this city. And I can, go outside and kind of live in the country if I wanted to. So that opens up the door, and also kind of helps with taking down overcrowdedness of the city. The automobile industry is definitely providing an economic base for cities. We're seeing Akron, Ohio, Detroit, Dearborn, Flint, Pontiac in Michigan. So we're seeing these industries are growing, and oil is being produced, obviously, from California and Texas. Oklahoma is one. The automobile even became more of a status symbol, both for individual families and to the rest of the world. We start to see it becomes a symbol of the Coolidge era. The automobile is becoming more than just a transportation vehicle. It is now really starting to play a role into changing the outlook of America. By the late 1920s, you're seeing around 80% have registered motor vehicles. And so about one automobile of every 5 people. So that's pretty crazy. 1 in 5 had an automobile. Number 14 is right here, and number 17 is Charles Lindbergh. The airplane obviously becomes a big deal. Like, look, we had airplanes in World War I, and they've been a big part, but they were never commercial. Didn't really use them for commercial base. It's mostly military. Although the first flight in 1918 was a disaster, we start to see that the airplane becomes useful in the U.S. Postal Service to transport mail from place to place. We see Henry Ford also created a tri-motor airplane in 1926. Then transatlantic flight by Charles Lindbergh is also successful, along with Amelia Earhart, the promotion of airplane. We'll get to more into Charles Lindbergh into the next chapter. But by 1927, the Lockheed company produced a single-engine plane, the Vega. It was one of the most popular transport airplanes in the late 1920s. Founded in 1927, Pan American Airways inaugurated its first transatlantic passenger flights. The answer number 15 is right there. And so we start to see what we start to see is that from 1920 to 1929, Americans are really starting to soar in their wealth, not just in the air with the airplanes, but you're seeing they're soaring with their wealth. We see that we're kind of getting out of this, the early 1920s, the economy wasn't as great, but we're starting to get industry back up again. And with industry getting back up again, it's only increasing people's wealth and helping people have a better wage. The average income rose more than 35% during the period from $522 to $700 and $705. So the annual income is pretty good. That's pretty good for everybody. People found it easy to spend that extra income and then some. Also, gasoline. Gasoline had a bit of a role in the boom of the economy with machines, powering machines, but we start to see a shift from gasoline to electricity. Electricity starts to power up a lot of these motors to these machines, and it takes it a little bit further. It allows the machine to run more efficiently and last longer with this power. The electrified was no longer restricted to central cities now, but we could see it transmitting to suburbs. It's starting to grow grow bigger communities or help communities expand with electricity, expanding outside of cities. The number of electrified households grew, although most farms lacked power, which we're going to talk more about that in the 1930s. And then by the 1920s, we start to see that new products are used to thanks to electricity. So you have electrified irons, you have refrigerators, you have cooking ranges, toasters, you name it, they had it. So as goods are flooding the market, we're starting to see advertising agencies are starting to really promote these products and be like, hey, you need to go and buy these products. And so psychologists are studying people's behaviors and using them for certain slogans like say it with flowers, and that helped to boost the florist businesses from 1912 to 1920, between 1912 and 1924. And then there was the one slogan, reach for a lucky instead of a sweet. So encouraging people to get a cigarette instead of a piece of candy, that helped people get into smoking, which that's maybe not the best thing. And that's part of the reason why we have certain regulations today. But brand names became a familiar from coast to coast, and luxury items now seemed like necessities. So one of those necessities was mouthwash. We see Listerine in 1923 really started to come out and promote a new form of disease, halitosis, which really was bad breath. The reason why they came out this way with a made-up word is because they didn't want to. Well, they first tried to say, "Hey, this is for your bad breath." Well, here's the problem with Americans: we don't want to admit that we're weak. That there's something wrong with us, especially with bad breath. We don't want to admit that we have bad breath. So they realized this, and so they basically came up with a made-up word called halitosis, and instead of saying bad breath. And what they did was say, "Ooh, this halitosis is in your mouth, and it could lead to bad breath," is how they kind of phrased it to not, kind of mislead the public to an extent. They already are misleading. But when people found out about halitosis, that's when they were like, "Oh no, I need to get Listerine and clean my mouth." And so this whole idea was to promote a fake disease, which really was bad breath, to get people to buy this product. And it worked, but that's what ends up happening. And then so we start to see that this type of thing is happening all over the world, is that people are applying this advertising power across different areas, and songs and certain chants are being created to help promote products, and it's just only helping them. But during the 1920s, most Americans believed prosperity would go on forever. We start to see that the average factory worker was producing 50% more at the end of the decade than its start. But there's a lot of questions moving forward. And I mean, hadn't the national income grown from $64 billion in 1929 to $87 billion in 1929? Yes. Weren't most corporations making fortunes? Yes. Wasn't the stock market reaching new heights? Yes. But the question was more of, is this going to last? That was the biggest question, and that would be a no. It wasn't going to be sustainable. Number 18 is farms right here. We do see that productivity increased businesses. A lot of mergers happened during this time. It made a lot of money, but we're starting to see it happen with electrical equipment, steel, automobiles, public utilities are now merging. Chain stores are sprouting up with selling groceries, drugs, shoes, and clothes. Congress passed a law, though, allowing national banks to branch within cities of their main office. So basically create additional branches. They'll go outside of the city, maybe go into a town. But as the number of businesses grew, so did the income between workers and managers. And so there's a big gap that's starting to build between those who have money and those who don't have as much money or hardly at all. The iron and the railroad industries are among others that weren't as prosperous during this time. Farms nationwide suffered losses as well. New machinery They were producing more food, but the problem is by producing more food with new machinery, the success of new machinery, it drove the prices down, and that hurt the farms. Your definition to installment plan is here. In addition to advertising, we start to see installment plans being put on, being created. And this is basically credit. Easy credit was available with installment plans, as it was called. And it was to enable people to buy goods over an extended period without having to put down much money at the time of purchase. So it was, for example, like, buying a new bed. I've bought a new bed in the past, and instead of, having the money to be able to pay it off right then and there, I did an installment plan where we'd get 0% for 12 months. And then as long as we paid it off within those 12 months, we wouldn't be charged any interest. And hey, we've got it all paid off. But then if we didn't pay it off, then they would charge us an outrageous rate of interest. So this is an idea to encourage people to buy their goods and hopefully pay them off as quickly as possible. But banks provided the money at low interest rates. Advertisers pushed the installment plans. You would see even grow, the stores themselves. I mean, that's like when you go shopping, they're like, hey, would you like to apply for this credit card? And no, I don't, but they push it. So we start to see installment plans really deal with our economic system. And this is becoming a big concern because Americans focus their attention on the present and little concern for the future of understanding, can I really pay this off? Is this installment plan really good for me? And so this is a question we're going to answer in the next chapter. What could possibly go wrong with the nation's economy? A lot. The Great Depression. We're going to talk about it. So the decade of the 1920s brought many technological economic changes, yet Coolidge era was built on a paradox. The president stood for economy, frugal way of life. Don't spend all your money. Be careful with it. But instead, people were going out spending money like crazy. We're going to talk more about that in the next chapter. Life definitely seemed easier and more enjoyable in the 1920s for a lot of Americans, but there's a warning to come, and we'll talk more about that in chapter 13. All right, guys, we're done with the chapter. I got to go. See ya.